Smith parks one into right down the line. It may go. Go crazy, folks. Go crazy. There's a drive. Way back. It's one baby. Swinging a high drive into left. Back towards the track. He's at the track. He has it. And the Cardinals world champion for 2011. A little bounces slowly toward Bryant. He will glove it, throw to Rizzo. It's in time, and the Chicago Cubs win the World Series.
This is the Team of Rivals podcast. No insiders, no anonymous sources, just passionate analysis from the bleacher seats. Here are your hosts, Ron Nuttall and Peter Geddes.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the show, and happy Thanksgiving, everyone. By the time this comes out, it'll be the kickoff to the holiday season.
Not even happy Thanksgiving. Sorry to interrupt your intro.
Thanks, man.
But this one's kind of important. Not only happy Thanksgiving, on the night that we're recording it, happy birthday to the boy. Number 5.
Oh my goodness. Definitely happy birthday to that boy. 5 years old. Wow.
5.
Man, time flies, right?
Tell me about it. 5 years ago, it was Thanksgiving, and had no idea that the day was about to change. But
well, I'm glad you broke in the intro for that. That is good. That is big news. Big news. So we had some other big news as far as baseball this week. Some not so pretty news, I guess, if you want to put it that way. So we had, let's put it this way: the tomahawk chop came down on the Braves this week for a little bit of a international signing scandal. One GM banned for life, or I guess you should call him one baseball executive banned for life. Another one, right? And then we have the world's on Ohtani watch, I think, now that the Players Union and the Japanese Professional Baseball League have tentatively agreed on a deal to post Ohtani. So expect some news on that in the coming weeks. And we still have no idea if Stanton will or will not approve anything, except potentially a trade to the West Coast. That's still largely up in the air, and not much has been answered over this last week. So with that said, I think we'll kick it off. Pete, you've already introduced yourself. And
I have.
So what did you get that boy? What was his 5th birthday gift?
He got a bunch of stuff. He got a train that he had been looking for. He got some tracks for his wooden tracks. And then I took him on a day long.
Can you fit any more in that house?
Yeah, barely. It's a good thing that I had to clean so that I could put all the tracks away, because otherwise his grandpa and grandma would have tripped when they come for Thanksgiving tomorrow.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But and then I took him on a day-long train ride on the CTA. It's, organized by the Illinois Railway Museum here in Illinois, which is the largest train museum in the world. And we spent all day riding the L lines. Got to stop at some stations that have been closed for 40 years, but they were able to stop the train there. Got to go on some tracks that most people don't get to ride on. Got to ride on a train that's almost as old as his dad. So it was a good day. He loved it. Yeah, almost 1976.
Yeah.
He loved it. We got on the train at 9:00 in the morning, and we got off at 5:30. And he was on edge the whole day. He had a great time. And then we had a birthday party for him at Pump It Up on Saturday, and got him a big obnoxious cake that was designed to look like one of the new Metro trains here in the Chicagoland area. So I can't imagine that his 5th birthday was disappointing in any way.
No, it doesn't sound like it. That kid's all about trains, that's for sure. Educating my kids on trains when they're here to visit, by the way. But anyway, so I'm glad you broke in with that. That's great. And I did see some of the pictures you had posted on that, so it looks like it was a good day.
Yeah,
so on to this not so pretty news, I guess, as far as baseball goes. So and I don't know. There had been speculation. Well, just recap the story real quick, right? The Braves they finally had penalties levied on them from Major League Baseball. What ended up happening is they've lost a total of 13.
When you consider the guy that they already had an agreement with for 2019, yeah. Plus, not only do they lose these guys, they also lose a draft pick.
Well, they lose a draft pick, but they lose international bonus pool money for like the next, I think, through 2020. And they also only have about half. Well, they have about half the money to spend that they normally would have had. And I think they have to. They cannot operate independently for the next several years as far as international signings. So I'd say these penalties are pretty stiff. I mean, they sound like they are on paper. It doesn't sound like any joke. And when you violate a baseball rule like that, it gets pretty serious. And so,
so they better win. They better win soon because their system is going to be depleted really quickly. Once their top prospects make it, the top prospects that they still have, once they make it to the majors, they better win because they're going to have nothing to deal. Because you're right. You look at just what they're restricted to in the IFA. They can only spend $300,000 per player this year and next year. In 2019-20, they can only spend $10,000 a player,
which is nothing. I mean,
they're not going to be able to get anyone.
No.
And in 2021, they're going to lose half their signing bonus pool.
Mm-hmm. So you know what that causes them, and then you really have the pressure's on the new GM Anthopoulos, right? Alex Anthopoulos is the new GM. But whoever their scouting, I don't know how the Braves organization set up. I mean, all these things are different, right? Sometimes the GMs are more involved in who they scout and who they recruit. And then other organizations have a scouting director and talent acquisition kind of guy that, heads that part up. But what this really puts pressure on them for, as far as the U.S. amateur draft, it's a really can't miss for them.
Yeah.
I mean, they really, it's going to force them to, here's what I'm envisioning, Pete. I'm speculating on this, but they're going to go into the next 3 years of drafting, and they're going to be like, whereas normally you might be in position to take a couple risks. Maybe you're drafting a high school pitcher, which, a lot of teams don't necessarily like to do. But now they can't do that. Now they're going to have to draft that kid out of college that's a little more polished. They're going to have to draft those. They're going to have to make safer picks. It means like you really can't afford to miss anything because they're at an extreme disadvantage when you can't dip into that international free agent pool like all other 29 teams can. I'm not sure if the Red Sox still have penalties against them at this point or not, or if they're past that. But
I believe their penalties come off this year the same as the Cubs.
Okay, so with that said, I mean, a lot of the names on there, obviously, most of us don't know. The most popular was, and I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, so I might ruin it. It's either Kevin. Kevin's not a very international name, but his last name, I don't know if it's Mayton or Maitan. I have never heard it pronounced by anybody in media, so I'm not sure. I may be screwing that up, but he was a big name signing. I think it was in 2015 or 16. I think it was 2016. Had a rough first year, I think, in the Appalachian League. I probably could have seen him out here, but I don't follow the Braves single A goings on. So I have no clue. I'm clueless as far as when you get down that level of minor leagues. I just really don't pay much attention to it. I read what I read about my own team, and that's about all I know. So, and then you mentioned the other guy that they had an agreement in place with, and of course they don't get him either. So it doesn't matter. I mean, let's face it, right? I mean, 9 out of these 12 guys were never going to sniff the big leagues. But
let's also say the guy that they had an agreement with is 14. So
how's that even? Yeah, I mean,
so they already had an agreement to pay a 14-year-old from the Dominican Republic.
I wouldn't give my 12-year-old $40 to do anything without me seeing what he was doing. It's really amazing you're going to commit like that to a 14-year-old.
Right. But the fact that they were able to do that because he's just not old enough to be signed anyway. It's one thing to disregard the rules, and I'm sure that what we're going to find out is that is happening. This isn't the only team that's doing it.
Sure,
but
right.
That's blatant.
No, and I think that's why the hammer came down so hard on them, is that it was so widespread and blatant.
Yep.
And it couldn't have stopped at the GM's office. There had to be other parts of that organization that were aware of what was going on. There's money involved. And when there's money involved, the GM doesn't have his own purse there where nobody asks how he's spending that money. I mean, they know. And so that's why you see the penalties as they are right now. And this is an unprecedented situation. Now, I've seen, early comments on this when I read the report on MLBTradeRumors.com. It was largely, I think it came from Jeff Passan, was where most of the links and things were leading to his report on it.
Yep.
And there's a lot of comments, and you brought it up before. Boy, it sure, it seems to be in the fans' mind, and it really, it's whatever narrative they're trying to stick with, right? If you're a Braves fan, they're looking at this going, well, gosh, they didn't do something as nearly as bad as the Cardinals. That's that guy from the Cardinals who hacked the Astros database system. how come the Cardinals didn't get punished like this? And so it's interesting to look at that and go, I think the one thing you look at and go, boy, if you break a baseball rule, an established baseball rule, the penalties are really hard. When it's not a rule or it goes outside of baseball's jurisdiction and all of a sudden the federal government steps in and handles it, yeah, the baseball penalties might seem like they were less. But I think those two situations they're different. And I know that investigations are going to happen. Well, we don't know the extent, right, of what Atlanta has done yet. We only have the first report that's going out. So we really don't know how deep this goes. Right. I mean, at least it hasn't been released publicly. So we don't know all the facts. We only know what we know today. So, I mean, let the second guessing on what happened to the Cardinals begin. And I don't want to make this conversation about them because I don't think it is. It's just it came up today. And so I thought it was worthy of mentioning. I mean,
well, I'll say I disagree with if any Braves fans are looking at what the Cardinals did and saying, wow, that's not fair. What they did is worse. I totally disagree with that, right? The Braves circumvented the system what looks like 4 years and in a very deliberate and systematic way. And so they deserve to have the hammer come down on them. So I don't buy that argument. However, I still think, and we discussed this last spring, I still think the Cardinals got away with something. And let me finish the thought because we discussed it before and I didn't feel like I did at the time. Whether or not, and I forget what his name is, but whether or not the guy from the Cardinals who hacked into the Astros scouting system Chris Correa, whether or not he passed that information along to anybody else in the organization, if he was involved in drafting, scouting, trades, if he was involved in that process at all, whether or not anybody else was directly informed of what he knew, then there should have been a bigger penalty because he knew that stuff. So if I knew, for example, that the Chicago Cubs really, really valued Jason Hayward and we're dead set on signing him, and I go to Mozeliak and say, hey, you know what? I think that we can drive up the price on the Cubs. Let's do it. We're not gonna sign Hayward. We don't think he's worth the money, but I think we can drive up the price on the Cubs. And I give no reason why. I just advise that we do. Well, then that's using the knowledge that I gained from hacking into the Astros system in order to benefit my team. Doesn't matter if he shared it directly with anybody else. If the team benefited from what he knew, then he should have been punished. And it certainly sounds like they did. But either Major League Baseball wasn't inclined to make it pay the price, or else MLB just didn't feel like pushing that hard in order to find out how the Cardinals benefited. So in that case, I think that the Cardinals did get away with something.
See, I don't disagree with you, and I think at the time I'd even go on record as saying I was surprised that it wasn't more harsh. But with that said, I mean, if I think about it now, we've had some time in between, at least, to think about this. Now that this comes up, it does. I mean, I haven't thought about it for months, Pete. I haven't thought about that whole situation for a very long time. But now that this comes up, you kind of do pause and go, okay, let me look back at that for a second. And evidently, Major League Baseball couldn't find enough there to prove that, one, anybody else in the organization really that was in on it and knew, right? So I mean, from what we know now, they didn't know. But your point's valid. I mean, whether they knew or not, they could have benefited from information or knowledge that he obtained. And I think what Major League Baseball couldn't do is they couldn't prove, okay, how much damage did this cause? He wasn't the scouting director very long. I think he was only there a season. Maybe he was on his second. I'm not sure. I have to fact check myself on that one. He was only there for a couple of years, and he was an assistant prior to that. Now I believe now he reported under Jeff Luhnow, which eventually became the Astros GM. And his excuse was, well, I think Jeff Luhnow stole some proprietary algorithms and formulas that we use to evaluate. That just sounds like bullshit to me, and it did at the time. It just sounded like a fast excuse to try to wiggle your way out of it. But I just don't think Major League Baseball, and I don't think it's was they didn't press on it. I mean, because this really was in with them. I mean, they investigated this thing for a very long time. I just don't think they could find enough there to go, wow, the Cardinals benefited this much. And so I just don't think they knew one way or the other. So they had to levy some kind of penalty. So they did. Now, whether it was enough or not, I mean, it depends. Again, it really depends on who you are and who you root for. I really thought they would have been hit harder. I was surprised that they only lost what they had lost. But it was something. I just don't think. I think Major League Baseball was in a place where I don't think they knew what to do with it at some point in time because they just didn't have enough to go off of.
That or else
his plea guilty.
That or else
his guilty plea.
That or else the fact that DeWitt led the charge in getting Rob Manfred hired as commissioner. That could have had something to do with it. That's going
into Kennedy assassination shit there. I don't.
You think so?
Yeah, I do. I mean, that's like Bill DeWitt is not Jerry Jones.
USA Today ranked him as the the fifth most powerful person in baseball last spring.
Okay, so what is the Astros? Or sorry, what are the Braves ownership group? Do they have any influence at all? I mean, or is it just
they weren't in the top 100?
You can buy your way out of it. I mean,
no, but I mean, when the person who basically handpicked you and championed your candidacy as the new commissioner, his team is facing punishment, and you go easy on him. Doesn't look good.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, look, I can't. That's fine. I mean, there's no way of proving that you're wrong. There's no way of proving that you're right.
I know, but again, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good that the guy who headed your hiring committee, his team falls under the auspices of an investigation from your office, and you, in what is generally agreed, you go easy on him. I find somebody who can defend.
Well, find somebody that can explain how much the Cardinals benefited from. Because the only name that I heard come up was Marco Gonzalez. The Astros' interest in scouting report, and the Cardinals could have plucked Marco Gonzalez as a draft based on information they knew from the Astros system. That's the only name that I have heard that's ever come up.
But what we don't know is what signings did the Cardinals not make based on information from the Astros database.
Right. So, I mean, what are they supposed to levy a heavier penalty based on a bunch of speculation? I mean, how are you
what speculation? He hacked their system.
No, Pete, you just said that, we don't know who the Cardinals didn't sign because of who they knew, but that's speculation. I mean,
well, I know, but Ron, the crime was not using or not using information. The crime was hacking into their system. That's breaking.
Which he's in jail for 4 years for.
I know, but apparently it's okay with Major League Baseball if you do that. Major League Baseball punished teams this year for using video to steal signs during games and for using Apple Watches and other electronic devices in the dugout. They punished teams. How is that any different from hacking into another team's system, scouting systems, and reading their reports?
Well, how is that any different from just stealing signs purely anyway, right? Just stealing them from the dugout or putting pine tar too high on your bat or corking your bat. I mean, what do you want me to say? I mean, this is for you to claim that this is basically no big deal. That when did I ever say that it wasn't a big deal? First of all, I've never said that. I've never even thought that. I've never even felt that way, ever. I've already said, Pete. I think I just said that I'm surprised that they didn't get hit harder. Is that saying it's no big deal? Yeah, actually, it is. Okay. So we'll have to disagree. You're saying I'm surprised they didn't get harder, but hey, I mean, he committed a crime, but he didn't really break rules. Okay, so would it make you and your angle coming at this as a Cubs fan happier if I just said the Cardinals should have to forfeit everybody they've drafted from 2013 through 2016? No, that would be excessive. I firmly believe that. No, that would be excessive. No, and it's got nothing to do with me being a Cubs fan, because I think what happened to the Braves is absolutely appropriate. And that's got nothing to do with me being a Cubs fan. That has to do with staying within the confines of Major League Baseball's rules and fair play.
And I'm sorry, whether it's stealing signs or signing players illegally or hacking into another team's database, you're breaking the rules and you're violating the rules of fair play. And if we're not going to have those kind of rules, right? If we're not going to agree that we're going to abide by rules of common decency, right, of fair play and sportsmanship, then what's the point? Why continue following the game if the level of penalties, the severity of penalties are going to be different for different teams? Nobody disagrees that Correa hacked into the Astros system. Nobody disputes that.
Right.
And yet for some reason, you guys get a slap on the wrist. And meanwhile, the Braves, who also violated Major League Baseball's rules regarding international signings, got hammered, as they should have. You want to send a message, you hammer people. The message that was sent with the hacking of the Astros database is, it's not a big deal.
Okay. My last thing I'm going to say on it is, as far as we all know, one person in the organization was guilty of doing this. That one person's in jail for 4 years. So I don't know a stronger message to send to any baseball executive.
But Major League Baseball has nothing to do with him spending time in jail. And just because something is a federal crime doesn't mean that it shouldn't also be punished within the confines of Major League Baseball.
So your disagreement is just how much they were punished then, obviously. It should have been a lot worse.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. It should have been a lot worse.
And I don't know that I know like how much worse would have been appropriate. I don't know that what they were given was a quote unquote slap on the wrist. I mean, how do you determine how much was done? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. And evidently Major League Baseball felt that the rest of the Cardinals front office and ownership group truly had no knowledge of this. And I'm sure that the Cardinals organization knows that, well, we benefited from something indirectly even. And so they got a penalty. I guess that it's debatable to a wide swath of us fans, like how appropriate or inappropriate was it? But what do you do at this point? I mean, I think most level-headed fans like myself go, wow, that was okay. I thought that was going to be much worse, but it wasn't. So what do you do? I mean, do you petition to have, harder penalties, to, retrofit harder penalties on them because you feel, your moral compass as a Cardinal fan, you should be mad at them? Should you, not buy a ticket? I don't know. I don't know what would satisfy you.
Ron, obviously we're going to have to agree to disagree because there are other things that came out of this that raised questions about the Cardinals knowing just how late they gave up their two highest draft picks in a season or in a draft after they aggressively targeted a qualified free agent, which meant that they lost a draft pick for signing Dexter Fowler. And then they lost their two highest available. Well, they'd already lost their first round draft pick by signing Dexter Fowler. So it really didn't hurt as much to lose those two highest available. Now, did it? Now, if they knew that was coming down, then it behooves them to be aggressive on the QFO market.
Yeah. So you believe that's really what drove them. I mean, that they didn't maybe feel like they need him, that you think they went after him more aggressively because we're going to lose that pick anyway. We might as well nab somebody on the free agent market. Right.
Possibly.
Yeah, it possibly. I mean, can you, if an organization knew that's the penalty, can you blame them for doing that? Or do you say, well, we're going to do the right thing and just lose that first pick? I mean, of course they're going to do that. And I don't know of another team that wouldn't have done that.
And let me, and going back to something, and I'm sorry that I'm searching the internet in order to play gotcha, but you said that nobody else in the organization knew. But while in court,
I don't know. I'm going off memory. I'm not on the internet right now.
While in court, under oath, Correa admitted to the judge that when asked if he found any Cardinals information in the Astros system, Correa responded affirmatively. Who did you tell? The judge asked. Colleagues. Correa went on to confirm that by colleagues, he meant people he worked with in the St. Louis Cardinals organization. Okay. So then it's not just limited to him.
Okay. And I don't know if anybody else has been punished over it.
Right. Exactly.
I don't know if there was another.
Why? And that's the question is, why did the Cardinals get off so light? And I haven't been able to find anybody who thinks that the Cardinals were appropriately punished outside of St. Louis.
Well, you can throw me into that too, right? Go back and listen to our show.
Yeah, but what I would like is I would love to know why it is. And nobody is asking that question. Nobody's asking why the Cardinals got off light. They've just moved on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a GM that's banned from all this now. John Coppolella, he resigned 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, maybe it was even a month ago, but he resigned already, and now he's banned for life. And what does that feel like? You know,
he's not the only one.
Crawl into this.
I think that scout got banned for life too, didn't he?
The Cardinal scouting director.
No. The Braves scout.
Yeah. I think you're right. Of course, I'm thinking of the GM, the big name there. And so what happens in a person's head like that, right? I mean, you have this job that, you know, most people would die for, and you're out of it. I mean, you're out of it. So what's going on besides the legal trouble you could be in? Which is, it may not be a lot of legal trouble, right?
I can't imagine there is.
And so, but you're banned for life. I mean, that has to be the most terrible feeling. Not that I feel sorry for him. Don't get me wrong.
The only way that I could see that he could have broken the law in this case would have been if they helped to get visas or anything for their prospects by falsifying their documentation in order to get them into the country. I don't think that there's anything that says that they couldn't sign somebody to a contract when they're 14 years old.
Yeah. And so, and I hadn't read anything beyond just, you know, punishment by baseball. He's probably not facing anything else, but still, I mean, this is something that if you're at that position in sports, and I mean, let's face it. So he's banned from baseball. He's essentially banned from everything, right? Everything that's sports related. Nobody's going to hire him for anything. In professional sports again. So, I mean, it really has to be, I mean, where do you go from there? I mean, what's going on in your head? It's just really, again, I don't feel sorry for him whatsoever. He knew what he was doing. He knew the consequences of you break a baseball rule. You know, they've traditionally, they've been pretty strict on that. You brought up Pete Rose earlier, right? That was always a rule. You gamble on baseball, you're out. And so this is a rule that was established too. It's just, it's got to be a devastating feeling. Where do you go from there? Where do you get your paycheck after that? It's just incredible to think about.
You know, he had to know that was coming, though. He had to have anticipated that he wasn't going to be able to work in baseball again.
Well, I'm sure he didn't. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, as soon as you know, smoke started showing up, I'm sure he knew this was coming.
Yeah, because he knew what he had done.
Yeah, I mean, and the organization obviously did too, because he resigned and they didn't say much about it.
Right, and what John Hart left the Braves this week. Right. He stepped down.
I think within days of the punishment being publicly announced. I mean, within days. So, you know, and John Hart, that's a surprising one because, you know, he was really a highly respected executive. So how much of this was he aware of? You know, how much of this did he know? Is it more of an embarrassment than anything? Or did he think the penalties were so harsh that, boy, this is not going to be a fun place to be for the next 4 or 5 years, so I'm going to look for something else? I mean, I would say he's got a tough road ahead too if he wants to find employment again in a Major League Baseball organization. Or he was in television before that. He was with MLB Network.
Well, how old is John Hart?
What's that? Sorry.
Look, how old is?
Yeah.
What I wonder is how old is John Hart, because I wonder if
he may have been done anyway. He's older, I know that.
At least what we think. Still there, man?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Lost you there for a second. Yeah, he's 69 years old. I wonder if that wasn't a discussion with Major League Baseball and said, John, you resign and retire. We
won't pull your name through the mud.
Yeah, and we're not going to ban you. We're not going to ruin it. You know, you can go back to an announcing gig or an analysis gig, but you can't come back in a front office. That was kind of
I could see that happening.
That was one of those, you know, like being asked to resign. You know, you submit your letter of resignation, and we will give you a recommendation. But if you don't, then you'll be fired.
Yeah,
I think I have a feeling that it may have been the same kind of thing, that because apparently they started making calls to the Braves prospects a day or two ago. And so it would certainly seem that was probably the same call that was made was to John Hart saying, this is your escape hatch. This is how we're going to let you go without ruining your reputation. But I think you're right. I don't think there's any way that he didn't know what was going on.
Yeah,
because he had been around.
He may have not known the level of detail that eventually came out, but I mean, to be, and let's just say for a minute, he had no idea. He was letting this GM operate autonomously. He wasn't, micromanaging him. He wasn't. Let's just say he knew nothing. This still may have been enough to be like, that guy's under my watch.
Yep.
And this happened, and this is 69 years old. Too much. I've been doing this for too long to have everything in like this. I'm just going to walk away.
Well, and you look at it as the president of baseball operations, whether it was a sin of commission or omission, right? Either he knew about it or he should have known about it. And either way, he screwed up too.
100% agree. So where does Atlanta go from here? They're certainly not done. Does this set them back? Sure it does, but they still have one of the stronger farm systems in baseball. They lost a lot. Losing, let's just say 13 players, right? It was 12 that were active that in their organization, one they had an agreement with under the table. That still has to be a setback. I know you through the draft and free agent signings, journeyman. I know you can replenish that minor league system, but to have all of that happen at once immediately, you mentioned it before. We got into this whole thing that those are trade chips down the road, right? Not every one of those guys we're going to be on your roster in 3 years. Maybe 3 of them are going to get a taste of the big leagues. Maybe 1 or 2 will stick, but most of them weren't going to see the light of day anyway. But there's trade chips that are now gone that came from a highly touted 2015-16 international free agent class. And so it'd be interesting to see how many teams step up and scramble for these few names on there that are highly regarded. The first one we talked about earlier. And the thing is, it's like, here's where the Ohtani, which is a good segue into that one. How many, the teams that are looking at making a serious bid for Ohtani are probably not going to be going after these guys right away, because that's going to eat into what they can spend.
Well, here's the interesting thing about that. Just looking at this. Well, one, you're absolutely right. This does hurt, but these are all picks within the last 2 draft classes. So you have to assume that very few, if any of them, are advanced. So in the short to medium term, I think the Braves are okay, right? The top levels of their organization are still stacked, and they'll probably be able to make a fairly significant run. But yeah, it's probably in the coming years where they're going to start to fall short as that lack of picks starts to demonstrate itself.
So I think about 2020 is when they're really going to feel the pain.
I agree. Because they're also going to be limited, as we discussed earlier, they're going to be limited in the current signing period, next year's signing period, and the 2 years after that. So that's going to hurt them. But specifically regarding Maitan, or however he chooses to pronounce his name, he was signed for $4 1/4, and apparently
Are you lost in thought there, or did I lose you? I lost him. All right, so we're gonna have to hang on here, folks. We'll get we'll get Pete back in here. Let me summon him back onto the show here. Bear with me. We'll see if Pete can step back in here. Obviously, he had a connection issue, and he just dropped off in mid-thought. And it's not like Pete to be for a loss of words, so that strange stretch of quietness there. You obviously know we had some kind of technical issue, and hopefully he'll be back up here. There he is.
You there?
Yeah, I am. That was strange. I mean, you're never at a loss for words. So
where did it drop out? I got it. I'm on. Stop ringing. Okay, where did it drop out?
I don't know. I don't know because I now I'm paying attention to the fact that you weren't on. I had to invite you back in. So right. We were obviously talking about down the road the impact.
Yeah. Okay. So you didn't hear me talking about
and the effect on Ohtani. Yeah.
Okay. So so the interesting thing is that I know it's definitely the case from my 10, and I don't know about the others, but I would assume it's probably similar. Teams can either use any leftover money that they have for 17-18, or they can use their 18-19 international bonus money, which takes off the caps for a lot of teams, and the Cubs are one of those teams. The Cubs currently are limited to signing players for no more than $300,000. That cap comes off on July 1st. So if they wanted to, the Cubs could sign Maitan, for example, for whatever amount and allocate that amount to their 18-19 signing period, which means that basically all 29 teams can be in on his signing, because I don't know that there's anybody who has been given a cap yet for the 18-19 signing period.
Yeah, and how much of that applies to a Japanese player coming over, right? And so does that have any impact on it at all?
I think it does. Yeah, I mean, a Japanese player who comes before he's the age of 25, yeah, it affects their international. Well, yeah, obviously it does, because the Cubs can only offer him $300,000 as a max.
Right, and so that's why you're going to see anybody who's able to spend on him. You most likely won't see them first up to nab one of these players that are now free agents again.
Well, depending on where they are on their total cap, as far as their entire pool, right? Because if the Yankees had, for example, $8 million still remaining in their international bonus pool, then they could sign Ohtani, and they could conceivably sign Maitan as well, because of the limits on what they're able to sign.
Right. But I don't think anybody's in I don't know, man, I could be wrong, but I don't think anybody's, right. I don't think anybody's in that much, that extreme of a boat. But I think the serious contenders for Ohtani. And speaking of that, so now there's an agreement reached, right? Who are the names out there besides the Yankees that you're reading about that are seriously looking at this guy? I mean, is it the usual suspects? Or is there all of a sudden a new name in there, right? That hasn't dipped into the Japanese market yet?
Well, the ones that I've heard are obviously the Yankees. I've heard the Rangers. I've heard the Dodgers are interested. But who knows how true that is, because I thought that they were also in the penalty box. Maybe not. Who else had I heard? I think those were the primary names that I had heard as far as who kind of the favorites were, given the fact that they have money to spend as well as being interested.
Well, I certainly haven't heard the Cardinal, other than some fans on the internet. I haven't heard anything come from the Cardinals camp whatsoever about having eyes on this guy at all. And the other curious thing about him is, so we know he's a two-way player. Is that possibly make him? Not possibly. I really think that makes him more appealing to an American League team, doesn't it?
You would think, because then he can play.
He can DH and pitch
conceivably every day, right? Although, would you want to take that chance with somebody who grades out or who profiles as a starter? It'd be one thing if he was a relief pitcher, because then you just put him in the game and let him hit.
Perhaps that's what he becomes. I mean, I think that's possible, but I think the American League has an advantage on this one simply because they have the DH, and
I agree.
They have, I think, a lot more maneuverability where they could make this kind of thing work. And I think the fact that he is so young, I can see a team out there who's maybe a little more progressive and could, I think, give it a shot, to have that legitimate two-way player. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, he's young enough to, I think to roll the dice on that a bit. If he's one of these guys that's in his 30s is coming over, you probably don't do that. I mean, you probably go with which area is he stronger? Which do you see him fitting better? So I don't know, man. This is an interesting case because we hear of two-way players, people. We hear like after the fact. They failed as a pitcher, they became a position player. They failed as a position player, they became a pitcher.
It's not often
never at the same time.
Right. Yeah, I have to think, and not just because of the money, I have to think that the two favorites are the Yankees and the Rangers, right? Because they have the most money that they can offer him, and two, both of them have a strong tradition in place and probably a much better infrastructure of attracting and supporting Japanese players. Both teams have a history of multiple Japanese players coming over from the NPB and succeeding, and there aren't a whole lot of teams in Major League Baseball now that have that same tradition.
No, they don't. I would actually throw the Mariners in there too.
Yep, I agree.
But I haven't heard their name pop up in this one. And I'm sure it has, but I haven't read them as being one of the serious pursuers.
No, not nearly as much as the Yankees.
And it could be their financial. Maybe they don't have the money to spend on it. Maybe they could be one of those that's capped off a bit, or that's at a disadvantage this year. So anyway, that's an interesting thing to watch how that unfolds. And I'm assuming now it happens, right? I mean, he's going to be playing in Major League Baseball next year without a doubt. It's just a matter of who. Yeah, so that's settled. If I had to place my bet right now, I bet it's probably New York.
Yep, I agree.
So who's their first one? Is it Irabu, right?
Hideki, yeah, I think Irabu. It was Hideki, right?
So his two vices, I remember reading an article once. It was a New Year's resolution, Hideki Irabu. And I don't remember. Don't even ask me what year this was. I'm pretty sure this is in the 90s. His two vices. I think when it came to New Year's Eve, he said, "I'm going to give up smoking cigarettes and drinking soda." You don't hear that these days, right? I mean, you don't hear, "Oh yeah, I'm going to give up smoking" as a professional baseball player, right? I mean, it's like. And I speaking of that, right, and this is going to sound strange that I'm coming out of left field on this one. Seeing like photographs taken in the 1980s, and this could have been a spring training photograph, but Jim Leland with a cigarette in his hand in the dugout. Like, when was that okay? He's in a Pirate uniform, so he's obviously managing the Pirates, and we knew he managed the Pirates up through, all the way up to the mid 90s, right? And he was there I think in the late 80s, he was managing them. But so it had to be within that window. And here he is with a cigarette in the dugout. Like, when was that okay? And have you ever been on, maybe you've obviously been to Mexico at a resort here or there, and or the country where, we've had the rule in place now in the States where you can't smoke indoors for what, 17, 16 years now. And when you go to somewhere else, like, I remember we were staying in an all-inclusive resort in Mexico, and people are smoking in the lobby, and you're like, "Oh, what the hell is that?" But it was so common, like 20 years ago. How soon we forget? But to see a major league manager with a cigarette in his mouth, sitting in the dugout was pretty funny. It was a pretty funny image. Anyway, so we started with Hideki Irabu, ended up with Jim Leland in a Pirates uniform, smoking not a stogie, but maybe it's a Marlboro Red. I'm guessing he seems like a Marlboro guy. I would bet.
Oh, I'm thinking Camel's unfiltered.
Camel unfiltered, like Bobby, the stock guy, this warehouse guy at the old Bloomington store.
Oh yeah,
yeah. You might be right. He had that little bit of yellow browning around the
face.
Probably. I don't know. He had a beard. I never saw his face. But the rest of his beard was gray, but around the mouth area it was yellow. It was just, yeah.
So Ron, just to correct things and just to show how poor our memories are, Hideki Irabu was not the first Major League Baseball player to come over from Japan, although his signing did lead to the posting system.
Oh no! I didn't say he was the first one, because his first one was Nomo. Right?
Well, yeah, although technically Masanori Murakami played in the 60s, but he only played for like a year. Okay. The first one to have any success, yes, was for Hideo Nomo.
No. I didn't think Irabu was the first one. He's just the one I remembered because of the New Year's resolution to stop smoking.
He was the Yankees' first one. And he actually, I was just reading about it. His signing is actually what led to the posting system, because his rights were purchased by the Padres, and he said, "I'm not playing for anybody but the Yankees." And because of that,
I remember that. Like he was dictating who he was going to go to.
That's right. And so because of that, the posting system got implemented, because it was so widely criticized among Major League Baseball. Something about, I think it had as much to do with the way that the Padres purchased his contract as it did. The Padres purchased his contract from the Chivalote Marines. The criticisms of the sale from other MLB teams who wished to bid on him led to the creation of the posting system currently used. But he refused to sign with the Padres anyway. Oh, and so then the Yankees made a trade for Irabu's rights.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't have remembered the details of how that all went down, but I remember he was, he had a pretty much a one-track mind on who he wanted to play for. He never really panned out here though in the States. I don't know how many years he pitched. I'm sure you're going to look it up while I'm talking. By the way, do you ever listen to me when I'm talking, or are you always studying stuff on Google that comes out of our mouths to fact check us after the fact?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
I do listen.
Glad we established that. All right. So
I caught every bit of Jim Leland smoking Camel Unfiltered.
Well, I drugged that on as long as I could.
So that I would hear it.
Yeah. You needed to hear it. So anyway, not the last thing we need to cover tonight, but certainly a big one. Obviously, there has been no progress really on the Mike Stanton deal. Now, the one thing that we did learn this week is there are at least 3 known teams that have submitted formal offers, and I guess there could have been a 4th team that slipped in there and did the same thing. But we know that San Francisco sounded like they were first to the door with a formal offer, followed by St. Louis, followed by Boston, or it was Boston and St. Louis. I don't think it really matters. I'm not sure how close this thing is to getting settled at all. And I do know this. I mean, I don't know this, but I would say, look, if you're a betting man, you're saying right now, the Cardinals, not just the Cardinals GM, I'm guessing these other GMs are already working on Plan B.
Yeah.
Because, and especially if you're Boston or St. Louis, you have to be working on Plan B. You cannot wait for this thing to drag out. But this is like musical chairs. I mean, the music could stop. You have nothing left, and so they have to move on. If another deal. If the Cardinals are able to strike up another deal for some type of middle of the order bat, they're going to jump on it. They're not going to wait for this to get over. I mean, they're not going to wait for this thing to settle. So I would guess that Boston's probably the same thing. If they can work out a deal for JD Martinez or Eric Hosmer, they're probably going to do that and not wait on this. Now, and that's what Stanton risks here, and that's what the Marlins risk.
Yeah.
Is that these teams are going to start getting nervous, especially by the time the winter meetings come around. If nothing's done yet, I tell you what, how surprised you'd be all of a sudden Boston snaps up Hosmer, and then all of a sudden they're out of the Stanton picture. Now they're down to 2 locations, right? I mean, who knows if Marlins are even willing to deal with San Francisco. I don't know what San Francisco is able to offer. So the longer this drags on, the more leverage they all lose. So actually, the longer it drags on, the more leverage that the other teams have. So I think it's on them to get something done fast. It's on Stanton to make up his mind as soon as they get serious offers in.
Yeah, the latest I read, and that was or the latest that I'm reading, I should say, because I'm catching up, was at 8:00 this morning. Mark Feinsand of MLB.com said that it's currently the Giants who are in deeper discussions, and that's as far as it's gone. So. Sounds like they're the favorites, but you're right. How much do the Cardinals hang out on the periphery? How much, do they try to improve their offer, especially with the assumption that, it might take a little more convincing in order to get Stanton to accept that deal, because it doesn't sound like he wants to go anywhere but to the West Coast.
Yeah, and I think as soon as they're that's a tough. I mean, that's what we hear, right? And that's what we read, and that's what's floating around. You'd have to say a major league organization has better resources than we do, even though we have access to the internet. They have inside people that know people.
Yep.
You would have to think that they know more than we do, or at least you hope, right? I mean, God damn, how poor would it be if we as fans can just log on the internet and know more than our GMs of our own team?
Right.
It's just. I think once the Cardinals have a confirmation that he would not approve, I think they're already moved on. Now it's not on Miami to tell them that. I mean, they have to wait until they have a serious deal in place before they approach Stanton. Because it'd be stupid for Miami to say, no, you know what, guys, you are wasting your time. He's never going to approve a deal to you. They lose the St. Louis leverage at that point, and St. Louis is leverage for them right now.
Absolutely, and so are the Red Sox.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, any team that's rumored to be in is leverage for the Marlins.
Absolutely.
At this point.
Yep. So I don't know where this thing's going. So let's move on to hope. Look, the winter meetings are coming up. What, the second week, I believe, of December?
December, yeah.
Yeah. So it's just a couple weeks away, and I think I speculate right now, Pete. Now, I would have thought differently. I thought there was a more likely chance that this would be settled prior to that. I don't think it's going to be settled before the winter meetings happen. So I think this is going to drag on a little bit longer, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because I'm not going to be super disappointed they don't get Stanton. Sure, I mean, who would not want to see that guy in their home team uniform? But if it's not going to happen, they know they need to address the situation. And if they don't do it, they're just signing themselves up for torches and pitchforks being outside of Busch Stadium. I mean, because they've publicly admitted that's what they need to fix, and if they just don't do it, shit, that's going to be fun to watch. Because I live in Charlotte, I don't live near there, so I can watch it on TV. Burn it down, burn down Cardinal Nation. I don't mean people. I mean the restaurant. Come on. Anyway. So other thing, Alex Cobb, right? So the Yankees have jumped in as a serious pursuer. I don't know what you know on that one, other than I've seen those two names in a headline. Those are the two serious teams going after his services. And so I don't know if anything is really. How serious are the Yankees? How much of a threat do you think they are to? Because you were pretty sure you were pretty sure that this is where he was going, and it would make sense. His former manager, his former pitching coach. It's Chicago. Obviously, they're on a winning trajectory. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. But then it's the Yankees. And the Yankees were back in it. They were back in the thick of it last year. So what do you think? What are you hearing?
Well, nothing. I haven't heard anything.
Yeah, you've been on the L train. You've been on the L train for 24 hours.
No, I haven't heard anything on that I think it was 4 or 5 days ago that I saw that same headline that the Yankees were in and that they were one of the two favorites and they were pushing hard, but I haven't heard anything since then. And I wonder if that isn't taking a back seat for them now that Ohtani is definitely coming to the United States. And, do you sign Alex Cobb when you've got Shohei Ohtani coming? Are you really going to sign a number 4 pitcher when you have a potential ace on the horizon? Where are you going to focus your money? Because, despite their seemingly unlimited budget, at some point, the Steinbrenners are eventually going to say, okay, that's enough. Stop. Seriously. And is it worth it to get that much closer to the luxury tax for Alex Cobb?
I don't know. Ask Scott Boras. He's got a pretty good theory on property taxes. He probably translate that for him. Most of these teams you see, they're all making an effort to get under that. I mean, it's probably no fun once you're, especially if you're a repeat offender year over year, like the penalty gets worse, right? Then again, a team like the Yankees with their Yes Network, with all the other revenue streams they have, you'd have to think like, they laugh at stuff like that. But George would have. I'm not so sure about his kids. But so who knows how desperate they are to get under it.
The luxury tax has changed compared to when George was there, right? Because it's not just a money tax now. It's also a draft tax.
Yeah, right. There are other things in place. I do agree with that. But, George, he just strikes me as kind of, I can buy my way out of that.
But that didn't work for him in the 80s. He tried to buy his way out of it in the 80s, and it got him nowhere.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is what got him there in the mid-90s was not buying his way out of it. It was his own homegrown talent, right? I mean, that was the core of that team, was not a lot of free. I mean, sure, you had Paul O'Neill in right field. Was John Wetland a Yankee product, or was he an acquisition?
He was an acquisition. He came up with the Expos, didn't he?
That sounds right. Yeah. But I mean, you think of the core of that team, right? You had the 4 or 5 guys that created a legacy there, and it's funny because he tried to buy. You're right. He tried to buy his way into it in the 80s, but it ended up being mostly his own homegrown people in the mid 90s that when they really marched onto the scene. And of course, by the time the new millennia rolled around, he was back to trying to buy the championship, and they totally bought a championship in 2009.
Absolutely. Okay.
Isn't that disgusting when you see that happen?
You're not going to believe this. Yes, it is disgusting when somebody can buy a championship. I wish my team had done so, had successfully done so many times in the past. They certainly tried.
They did.
So you're not going to believe this. John Wetland started out as a Dodgers prospect.
Okay.
Was traded to the Expos. He only played for the Yankees for 2 years.
Yeah, well, because you had Rivera that stepped in. I mean, Rivera, took that whole road. They didn't need him.
Right.
Right.
It must be nice to be able to reload like that, right? You trade for somebody, he gets, 46 or 43 saves, something like that in his first year, and 2 years later, you let him walk.
You replace him with Mariano Rivera, nobody knew at the
Hall
time.
of Famer.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody knew at the time, but that is pretty funny. So I don't have any other big free agent news really that's happened. There's been some minor trades, but none of the other names that we kicked around 2 episodes ago, right? Buy it or bullshit segment. Really has been no progress on any of that. And now that we're heading into the holiday, we're kind of going Major League Baseball news blackout for like 4 days.
Yeah, I think that if we don't hear anything in the next 3 hours, we're not going to hear anything, because I have to imagine that as much as they have a reputation for working year round around the clock, even baseball executives try to take some time with their families. And Ron, I hope you're able to do that with yours as well.
Oh, 4 days worth.
That's outstanding.
Yep. All right. Well, where do we go from here?
Where we go from here is telling everybody to subscribe, share, like, rate, review on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and TuneIn. You can contact us at the show at teamofrivalspodcast.com. Obviously, visit the website, teamofrivalspodcast.com. And then also on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Happy Thanksgiving, my friend.
Happy Thanksgiving to you. And I'm glad you mentioned the website again. And I'm glad it's in our wrap up here. Because, folks, if you want to get all content that we put out, it's all on that website. So if you want the video version, if you want to look at our pretty faces talking and arguing back and forth about the Cardinals penalties, you can watch that in the flesh. And you don't have to go from site to site to site. You can go to Team of Rivals podcast.com and you can pick up the audio or the video versions. And all the links to all of our social media are on there. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So, Pete, hope you have a great holiday. Get that house cleaned up for the guests that are coming over. I've got to do the same thing. So I'm going to be at work immediately after this. Have a good holiday. And, folks, we will talk to you as soon as we can. Have a good week. Bye, everyone.